What's up? My name is Hunter Hermes. I am an artist, programmer, game developer, Live2D rigger, and a jack of all trades. The model you see here is owned and illustrated by Umi Tides. It is her VTuber persona. It was created using both Live2D versions 4.2 and 5.0. Just rigging the model took close to 80 hours, and I finished her just in time to help Umi create and submit a showcase for the 2023 Live2D Creative Competition, the night before submissions were due. We cut it pretty close. Umi even stayed up all night in order to get the video done. I'll go ahead and cover a little bit of how I rigged the model. To get started, I did some custom meshing or topology for pretty much every piece of the model. I'm well aware that there is an automatic mesh option. However, I had a very specific way that I wanted pretty much everything to move. Doing the meshes manually helped ensure that the images would stretch in the directions that I wanted them to stretch. While I had some experience with Live2D in the past, it was only with male characters, and I had never successfully fully finished a model, partially because it turns out I didn't know how to use the glue feature. If you're trying to get into Live2D rigging, make sure you look up glue. Besides that, I was still actively following and referencing tutorials and other works as I went. If you're interested to see which tutorials that I followed, go ahead and check the description down below. Once meshing was completed, I started putting pretty much everything into a warp deformer. For instance, if it was a layer associated to the mouth, everything mouth related, teeth, tongue, back of mouth, lips, those went into a warp deformer for mouth. Now, I wouldn't use the mouth deformer itself as part of working with the parameters. For that, I made child warp deformers that held specific layers. For instance, if I wanted all of the top teeth to move at a certain time due to a parameter, I would make another warp deformer labeled mouth top teeth XY, and then make sure that all of the layers associated to that got in that warp deformer. It helped a lot with organizing the hundreds of layers. As I mentioned earlier, Umi Tides herself is the one that did the illustration. She did a great job setting up the file as I had requested of her. She labeled pretty much everything. Everything was well organized in folders. Because of that, I thought everything was fine and peachy, but it turns out that my lack of experience did not know what I needed to ask for. For instance, I had not done a tail before, and so I asked Umi to draw the tail in the very illustrated way that she would like it to move. Turns out, in order to make a tail move nicely, you have to have one long straight tail. Any changes like this that were necessary, I took care of myself. For instance, when I decided that I needed the feet to be able to take a step, to get that look of depth, I needed a shadow, which did not exist, and so I had to create a shadow. Another area in which I needed some assistance was the chest. I had originally had Umi just mesh everything down. I figured I'd put, a point in the middle of each boob, wiggle that around, and it turns out that that does not work like that, and so I had to separate out the boobs from the rest of the chest. While working with Umi, because this was also my first time working with a more complete model, it's actually one of the first times I ended up working with the physics engine as well. And it turns out that the way Umi and I discussed the tail moving had not really been done often, and definitely hadn't been done in a way that had a tutorial associated to it. So I actually took about 3 days figuring out how to get the tail to move in the way that I wanted it to move. I tried everything from stacking 2 different pendulums on top of each other with the idea that one would go one way and the other would go the other. And while that did work initially, Once the model was exported into Vtube Studio, the lag on the tail was extremely noticeable. So I had to bring it back and work everything out to work with one physics pendulum. After lots of tweaking, I think I got the hang of how physics works, and the tail started swooping around absolutely beautifully. I am quite proud of that tail. If you like how Umi turned out, please make sure to like and subscribe to both myself, Hunter Hermes, and Umi Tides.